and thank you for joining us on the occasion of Rear Admiral Duke Heinz's retirement from the United States Navy after 34 plus years of honorable and faithful service. Special welcome to Admiral Heinz's wife, Susan, their sons, Kurt, Sam, and Mark.
Into my time.
Admiral Brown.
Now, as a veteran and to me, a personal hero, Duke will carry the title of Rear Admiral retired. The mark of a great leader is not how many followers they have, but how many leaders they create. He goes from admiral to dad very quickly, which makes him the dadmiral. And he doesn't just give orders, very transparent. And lastly, Duke's family has served alongside him in each tour, and we're grateful for their example.
Susan, Kurt, Sam, and Mark. By the authority vested in me, it is my pleasure to express the grateful appreciation of the United States Navy to you for your unselfish, patriotic, and devoted service. This is to certify that Rear Admiral Richard Duke Heinz, having served faithfully and honorably, is retired from the United States Navy on the first day of October 2023.
Friends, family, distinguished guests, thanks for joining us. Admiral Brown, thanks for your kind remarks and unhesitatingly jumping at my request to be my retirement officer. If you look at the program with our career biographies, you'll see that our careers parallel in a number of ways, and you've been a tremendous mentor and friend to both Susan and I throughout the years, so thank you very much. I'd like to personally acknowledge and thank all the people who made today's ceremony possible, particularly Naval District Washington for providing the color guard, the bosun, and the bell ringer. I'd like to thank the Navy Band for providing the wonderful music we enjoyed this morning. And how about that national anthem? Chaplain Johnson, thank you for your remarks. Ms. Therese Weinigan and the Navy Memorial staff for all their efforts to make this morning happen. I'd also like to acknowledge my side boys, each of you who I've served with in one capacity or another through the years. So thank you for traveling to be here today and be a part of our retirement ceremony. Colonel Grant Morris, my deputy from UCOM J4, Captain Kerry Yarborough, Captain J.C. Uribe, Commander John Bradenkamp, Commander Jeff Mills, came out of retirement. Good to see you, Jeff. Commander Jared Sweetser, Commander Mike Dawson, and Major Jonathan Chavez. Thank you very much. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Master of Ceremonies, Captain Darrell Wilson, as well as Lieutenant Commander Chris Culp and Lieutenant Commander Myra Brooks for planning and executing this entire ceremony today, and doing it for a flag officer that's stationed overseas has been no small effort. And you're carried a busy workload lately, and so thank you very much for all your efforts. Really appreciate it. Mario, thank you. Admiral Lippert, Linda, Admiral Harnachek, Admiral Skubik, Admiral Griffith, and Angela, thank you for not only joining us today, but for your leadership, your mentorship, and friendship to Susan and myself. So Admiral Harnachek, do you remember 20 years ago or so in the Oak Club in Philly, you at a hail and farewell cradling this little baby boy here that's 6'9". I think you held him for like 30 or 45 minutes. Susan was freaking out. She wanted her baby boy back. You wouldn't let him go. Who would have known, right? Who would have known? Yes, sir. Supply Corps Flag Wardroom peers, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with you all. You make our Corps stronger, warfighter ready every day, so thank you. My UCOM Wardroom shipmates and Florida Strauss neighbors, Major General Adrian, Elmo Spain, and Michelle, our J3 and Kaz, Major General Charlie Miller, our J5, and Brigadier General Rich LaBelle and Cheryl, DJ3. Thank you for joining us. We had a heck of a run the last couple years in Stuttgart and Europe. Wouldn't change 1 second of it. So growing up, I knew I always wanted to serve. My father and his youngest brother, Jerry, both had successful careers as aviators in the Navy and the Coast Guard, respectively. And my middle brother, Uncle Merrill, served in the Air Force. As a teenager, I was, and still am, a voracious reader. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Tom Clancy's novels, The Hunt for Red October, The Sum of All Fears, James Webb's Field of Fire, and A Sense of Honor, Fogarty and Dean, and Pat Conroy's The Lords of Discipline. But my 3.0 high school GPA didn't merit a ROTC scholarship, much less admission to a United States military academy. So off I went to James Madison University, the Dukes, to study international business and minor in Spanish. More on that in a minute, Admiral Griffith. Our next door neighbor was retired Supply Corps Captain Tom Sims. And during summer breaks, he'd share sea stories of life as a Supply Corps officer and an opportunity to put a business degree to use, learn some practical leadership and management skills, and join the Navy and see the world. Supply Corps School in Athens, Georgia was everything it was made out to be, and then some, until orders reading. So back then in 1990, they would open the officers club at 11 o'clock with a keg and hoagies. My Philly boys, hoagies. And commence orders reading for your first operational tour. The ensign detailer at that time was then Lieutenant Vincent Griffith. And he called my name and announced my duty station as Personnel Support Detachment, Rodman, Panama. Okay. It's 1990. The United States invaded Panama and disposed Noriega in 1989. The base, which was just outside of Panama City, Panama, was locked down. You flew from the United States to the fence line of the base, and you flew back. You weren't allowed outside the fence line. Not so attractive to a 22-year-old single young man looking for adventure, because I minored in Spanish. Somehow I cajoled the education counselor, Paul Talwar, XO Fast Eddie Fishburne, and CO Len Sapera to letting me slip into the submarine pool. And thus began an amazing 34-year journey. 3 years on SSN 667 Burgal, invisible, invulnerable, and invincible. Spent trolling the Barents, tracking Russian Akula and Typhoon submarines deploying from the Northern Fleet. And we've come full circle as I've gone back to UCOM for my last tour, and Naval Forces Europe talks about Navy submarines tracking Russian submarines from the Northern Fleet. But you haven't lived if you haven't had the pleasure of serving as diving officer of the watch in Sea State 3+, coming to periscope death in the North Atlantic. The beauty of the Sturgeon class submarines is they have fair water planes on the sail. Awesome for swim call in the Caribbean. Really cool. But not so much when you broach in the North Atlantic. And they would slam against the surface of the sea with this loud gong through the entire ship. Pretty impressive experience for a young ensign standing the watch. And the adage is your first tour of the Navy makes or breaks your career. Well, Wilhelm Adolf Hansen Jr., Butch, my skipper. Mess Specialist First Class Sean Fate, Storekeeper Second Class, retired Senior Chief Bill Scarborough, and Machinist Mate Second Class, then Third Class, then Second Class, A. Ganger, Jenny Teza, Shipmate, all put together a tremendous amount of time and patience mentoring and putting up with the young and naive Ensign Heinz. Thank you. Did I mention naive? Where the hell is Lemoore, California? Exactly. When I finally made it to Aviation Support Division in Lemoore, I got my supply wings with the tremendous help from mentors Larry Whipple, A. Suppo, Dan Smith, great to see you, shipmate, and the Assistant AIMD Officer, Big Red, Lieutenant Commander Kurt Shanahan. And AS Lemoore Commanding Officer Greg Rugdance Woolridge, prior Blue CO, soon to be new Blue CO, joined forces with Susan to line me up as selection for the supply officer for the Navy Flight Demonstration Team, Blue Angels. And off we went to Pensacola. Riding in the back seat of number 4, slot pilot Scooter Moyer's jet was one of the highlights of my tremendous career. But Blue Angel number 1, boss George Elwood Dom, taught me an early and important lesson in leadership and mentoring. I'd been given follow-on orders to join the supply department on board USS Enterprise in Norfolk, Virginia, and boss wrote a handwritten introductory letter for me to then Enterprise skipper, now retired Vice Admiral Marty Streak-Chanik. More importantly, he shared that letter with me. An impactful and teaching moment on how to lead and mentor sailors in your charge. So thank you, boss. Our team flight surgeon and all-around psychologist, Brian Hughes Buchanan, who remains a tremendous presence for us in all our lives from that amazing tour. Today, some junior officers lament the burden of having to go back to sea. We did join the Navy, I think, right? As a principal assistant on a big deck aircraft carrier, but I loved it. The Big E, USS Enterprise, CVN-65, first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, Ensign Jason Warner, Lieutenant Commander Steve Hartzell, Ensign Forrest Baumhover, and Captain Dave England Suppo. It was a blast. Meanwhile, Susan kept raving about our neighbor in Larchmont, Norfolk, that she had met walking our dogs. Steve, what a nice guy he was. Well, Steve was Captain Steve Moss, the Submarine Force Atlantic Supply Officer, now retired Rear Admiral Steve Moss, who took over as the lead supply detailer in Millington, Tennessee. So guess where Duke and Susan were headed next? With our dogs. Now, human resource management can be a humbling experience. You gain insight in the highs and lows of people's lives and careers. But my pit teammates, Brian Winger, Tracy Larcher, Doug Noble, Steve Gill, Joan Olmixon, Mark Esco, Kerry Yarbo, would argue that I experienced more highs than lows as the lieutenant shore detailer. All my constituents were more than eager to get off the ship and call me for the shore duty assignment. I'm pretty sure I was the only pitmate that got thank you bottles of wine and letters from their constituents. And the beauty of serving as a detailer was that you got to write your own orders. So off we were to Naval Inventory Control Point, still ICP at that time, Philadelphia, a small slice of naval aviation history. And little did we know that the home we bought in 2002 would be, we would live in for the 10 of the next 18 years and become home for our boys, ground our roots as a family. Philly fanatics beware. Then Rear Admiral Hardachek, Captain Andy Brown at the time, Tim O'Brien, Matt Ott, Joe Mahan, Bill Skinner, and of course the backbone of the ICP team, the civilian workforce. My first work wife, Donna Francis. Lisa Pizza Durante. Eileen Dorman. And of course the indomitable Miss Donna Gruber, who taught myself and a myriad of other young officers how to make lemonade from lemons when writing the weekly SIREP. And our adopted family, Lynn and Steve McFadden, Steve Jr., Kristen, and Kate. When your babysitters end up working for you and having babies, you have come full circle. Thanks for being here, Steve. And Jack, Courtney as well. Great to see you. The follow-on tour on the Navy staff in the Pentagon was by far the hardest job I've had, but I learned the most personally and professionally. Susan still professes, I don't know how we had Mark. I never saw you for 2 years. But the upside was I was selected to be the supply officer of the USS Nimitz in Coronado. And her joke was that I had worked 18 years professionally to get a department head parking spot on the pier in front of the aircraft carrier. And I had to sell my car and ride my bike and chain it to the sign. Millsy liked that because he got to park at my spot. Susan referred to Nimitz as my girlfriend. I prefer mistress. What a ship, what a crew, what a supply department team. From the CO, Admiral Mike Nasty Manazar, to the legendary supply team of Jeff Mills, J.C. Uribe, Leon Q. Quarles, Troy Groenberg, Doug Murphy, Scott Adams, many others. A 9-month deployment in support of operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, highlighted by a Steel Beach picnic barbecue for 6,000 of my best friends and strike group shipmates. And of course, the Tiger cruise home from Bremerton, Washington, where Mom and Dad got to experience firsthand what 5-star life on an aircraft carrier looked like. While departing Nimitz was certainly tough to embrace, fortune found us returning to Philly to serve as the Director of Aviation Operations, a plum job, but backstopped by the command's implementation of Navy Enterprise Resource Planning, ERP. At the time, the largest SAP ERP database conversion in the world, combining inventory and financial management systems into one system. Talk about a case study in organizational change management. But as usual, the team coalesced and knocked it out of the park. Afforded the opportunity to assume command of the Fleet Logistics Center in Jacksonville, Florida, was another incredible milestone. Back on the waterfront with sailors supporting naval air stations across the Southeast was a dream job. My deputy, Mitch Palmquist, Command Master Chief Glenda Atwood, great to see you, Glenda, Jeff Mills, Daryl Wilson, Stephen Edwards, Jared Sweetser, Paul DeMeyer, John Breedenkamp. Man, we had a great team. Work hard and play hard, shipmates. Back to DC for a tour as Strategy and Readiness Division Chief for the Joint Staff, for working for Vice Admiral Brown and Lieutenant General Broadmeadow and Mr. Jim Hawkins, provided a critical insight to senior decision-making, which I've carried forward through the years. Oh, by the way, Admiral Brown didn't mention, he sat that 1-star selection board. That picked me. But he did a pretty good job of playing his cards close while secretly torturing me for 9 months until the official announcement was released. Look, he's laughing, he remembers it. Yes, you did, sir. Then Chief Admiral Ewan sent me back to Philly for a third go-around as the commander. Wow. And we settled back into a familiar settling in our home, in our neighborhood, and familiar battle rhythm with work. And then the Navy had its own solar eclipse. New programs such as Naval Sustainment System, NSS, Performance to Plan, 80% mission capable Super Hornets, and a little thing called Audit Readiness for $30 billion in Naval Working Capital Fund inventory. I asked, and Admiral Skubic agreed to extend a third and fourth year as the commander, both for family, and I felt there was nothing more important in our Navy than work accomplished across the NAVSUP weapons system support portfolio. As a sidebar, one thing I learned quickly as a new flag officer is your inner circle shrinks very quickly. And it's important to have someone that you develop a relationship with, you can have a frank conversation and serve as a sounding board. Well, Lori Choffness and Lynn Cole, thank you. Head counsel and vice director were all that and then some. Both your friendship, your sage counsel, mentorship along the way. When Admiral Skubic pulled me aside in the spring of 20 as COVID was ramping across the globe, told me I was selected for my second star, I was shell-shocked to say the least. And then she said, hey, you're gonna go to UCOM and be the J4 and take your 3 teenagers with you. And your wife. Susan said, let's go. I took German in high school. I haven't heard a word of that in the last 3 years. So we packed up, we sold the house. We had visions of a European vacation. Well, COVID round 2, right? Kurt spent 2.5 months in lockdown, quarantine over the course of his senior year in high school. Somehow, when I came back to the United States to take him to college, the Department of Defense made a decision that we were going to send 130,000 Afghani refugees and their families through Europe to repatriate in the United States over the course of 5 months. And then this little land war in Eastern Europe changed those dynamics. But as a logistician, I can't imagine a more critical position across the department than the Director of Logistics at U.S. European Command for the last 3 years. With an absolutely superb team, Colonel Grant Morris, Colonel David Jones, Captain Constance Salina, Commander Mike Dawson, Commander John Christensen, Lieutenant Colonel Mike Harrell, Major Jonathan Chavez, and of course, our favorite logistics specialist, First Class Audrey Schuster. At one point last year, coming out of our morning planning session, obviously talking about Ukraine, Major General Charlie Miller looked at me across the table and said, hey Duke, you know you're the largest arms dealer in the world. A storybook ending to an absolutely fantastic journey. So to my family, the Heinzes and the Curtins, thank you for all your love and support through the years. We wouldn't be here today, certainly without you. To my boys, I'm gonna do it. Bruh. Thought I was a dad, but I'm a bruh these days. Kurt, we're proud of your journey, not only as a college basketball player, but as a student athlete. Can't wait to watch your games on East Coast Standard Time and hopefully catch a few in person this season. Sam, you certainly blossomed in Germany, embraced every culture our travels took us, and now we'll continue as we put you on a plane next Thursday to Vienna, Austria, where you begin studying for an international business degree at Salzburg College. Your snowboard will follow. Mark Sharkey, just over a year ago, we walked the old course in St. Andrews, Scotland for the British Open. So excited to see where your journey takes you, but no, both Mom and I are standing by to caddy when her ankle feels. When the time's right. And Susan, so most of you don't know, she stood me up on our first date. Admiral Brown was right. We met at a bar in Chesapeake. She was out with her cousin Cindy celebrating Cindy's 21st birthday. I asked her for her phone number. She wouldn't give it to me. Come to find out, she was working on her master's at ODU in athletic training and working part-time at Nutrisystem on Hampton Boulevard, right up from Naval Base Norfolk. So Ensign Heinz pulled up on a Tuesday at 11:30 lunchtime for our date in his Porsche 924 in his wash khakis. Bill, you remember that? The look on the front desk receptionist's face when I walked in the front door said it all. When I asked for Susan Curtin, she said, "Just a second." Susan walked out and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "We have a lunch date. I can't go to lunch with you." Needless to say, I got her number. So after she graduated with her master's and we lived together in Lemoore, decided to semi-elope with a wedding outdoors at Lover's Point with just our family and friends, including you, Big Red, Kurt Shanahan. As we drove over the coastal mountain range to Monterey, we worked on writing our personal wedding vows. I don't remember the whole script, but I remember this line. "I promise to be your best friend, biggest admirer, and loving mother to our children." In the early 90s in the submarine force, and probably way before then and maybe still today, there were a number of derogatory slurs. My nephew Reed is probably experiencing some of those today, that salty sailors used against junior sailors, both officers and enlisted. Most popular was nub, non-useful body. That meant you were breathing air on my submarine, but you weren't qualified to stay on the watch, so get qualified, shipmate. The other two were shipmate, said with a particularly snide sneer, shipmate, and lifer. You're a lifer. No, I'm not. I'm just going to do my 4 years. No, you're a lifer there, shipmate. Well, today I stand before you this morning guilty of both. Thank you very much. God bless our Navy. God bless the United States.
Rear Admiral, United States Navy, retired, and family, departing.